Even as far as Rocky movies themselves go, I feel like they were hit or miss.
I didn't think this day would ever come. There was no way that we were ever going to agree on a movie, and it was definitely not going to be this one because I had to drag you to the theater to watch this.
Always the marketing campaign. Best movie ever made.
Welcome to Backseat Directing.
We talk about movies, TV shows, comics, and more.
We're your hosts,
Andrew
and Arron.
We post new episodes every Monday and Thursday.
And on this episode, we're going over a movie review for Creed 3.
3, 2, 1, action.
Andrew, we just got back from the theaters not that long ago, maybe 2 hours or so. We're fresh off of watching Creed 3, which you aren't a big fan of Creed, the first two movies. You just watched the second one literally yesterday, and you're like, meh, it was all right.
Yeah,
But I was pretty excited for this movie.
Even as far as Rocky movies themselves go, I feel like they were hit or miss. And so there were 6 Rocky movies, now 3 Creed movies. So it's a 9-movie franchise at this point. And I feel like it's just naturally kind of been hit or miss with that many movies. I really like the first Rocky. I like Rocky 3 a lot with Clubber Lang. Rocky 4 is all right. I know that might be a controversial opinion because a lot of people like the Drago storyline in that movie. But I like 1 and 3 a lot. I think 2 is pretty good. And I do like 6 as well, where he comes back into the ring as like an older man. I thought that was really emotional, plus like the big tearjerker speech at the end. But Creed 1 and 2 are not movies that I feel like I had the urge to rewatch, which kind of to me says something bad about them. And I haven't seen Creed 1 since it was in theaters. I just watched Creed 2 recently, and while I found the villain as a really cool concept, I just didn't find the way the movie was executed very compelling. But Creed 3 overall, chef's kiss. I really enjoyed it.
Very good.
You were saying how they're touting it as the best in the franchise, the best of the Creed trilogy.
Yeah, for their marketing campaign, they kept saying, like, this is the best in the franchise, which I told you before we went. I was like, I kind of like that they're saying that, and they're not like, this is the best movie of the year, you know?
Always the marketing campaign. Best movie ever made. And you're like,
okay,
Toy Story 5? Really?
Right.
But Creed 3, was genuinely a good movie. And I was walking in with low expectations.
I feel like you were, like, a little salty that we were going to the theaters to watch this. I feel like I had to drag you.
You had to convince me of the topic because I was kind of like, Creed, like...
You watched Creed 2 yesterday, and I was like, I texted you, I said, how's the movie? And one of your responses were like, Michael B. cried a lot in it, but I just wasn't invested in it to be impressed with the acting. But I'm sure it was good, though. So you're like, I didn't like it, but the acting was probably good. I don't know. I didn't see it, though.
I watched Creed 2 over a span of 3 days. And I remember the second day I looked back and I was like, what do I have left in this movie? Like 20 minutes? And I had 50. And I was like...
That's brutal.
I was like, this movie does not feel very enjoyable to me.
Yeah.
But that said, like was very impressed with Creed 3. So what did you think of Creed 3?
It's definitely the best in the franchise. Yeah, I thought it was phenomenal. And we're going to get into more of our ratings and stuff of each aspect. But yeah, I thought it was great. I was buying into the hype, man. I was buying into the hype of Michael B. Jordan going head to head with Jonathan Majors. You know, he's fresh off of King. And I don't know. I was just ready to go. And I just really like movies that are about training and fitness and competing. Since that's something that I do. I don't box, but I compete and stuff. So,
what do you compete in, Aaron? Tell the people.
I compete in Speedo bodybuilding.
I was like, why are you taking so long to answer?
I was trying to think of like something funny, fake. But I just didn't have it right away. All right.
I was like, you don't know what you compete in? Aaron competes in Olympic weightlifting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was just excited for the training aspect of it, you know, and like how he kind of gets through the tough parts of training or even in life kind of affecting your training and stuff. I don't know, that stuff's always interesting to me. So I was pretty excited to watch this movie.
I personally resonate more with the family aspect than the competitive aspect. And maybe that's because, unlike you, I don't compete in my day-to-day life. And I'm, you know, obviously very big on family, something I've talked about on the show before.
Family.
It's all about family.
Shazam.
Go see Fast 10 this summer. So I resonate more with that. The best thing to me about the first movie was this relationship he was developing with a complex female character who was losing her hearing, but her passion is music. I thought that was really cool in the first movie. Mm-hmm. I didn't really feel much of her presence in the second movie. But then in the third movie, even though she has a child in the second movie, it's a big plot point.
She has a child. And I thought it was cool, too, when for the last fight, she opened up for him coming out of the
singing. I like that.
That was cool.
Yeah, I like that kind of better than how he came out in this movie, which was a little simplistic. But I definitely resonate more with the family themes, with the emotional. Like Southpaw is my favorite boxing movie, but this movie drew more on that like past, like that tortured past, and that brotherly bond that he had with Jonathan Majors' character, and then his duties as a father and as a husband, and now this family life that he's built up. So it had a lot more of those themes outside of competition in boxing. Maybe that's part of why I liked it so much more.
Yeah, I agree. I liked the kind of darkness that Creed went through in this movie. You know, it seemed like he was at kind of an all-time low at certain points and then kind of climbed back up. And then the fact that the person he's boxing was basically his brother growing up. Yeah. You know, and in a way, he kind of abandoned him. You know, so there's a lot of emotion that went into the fight, and because of how all that laid out, you kind of felt for both of them, or at least I did. You know, like I was rooting for both of them to win the fight. You know, like
it wasn't a simple villain by any means, and just stay tuned in if you're listening, because we're going to discuss the real world controversy involving Sylvester Stallone, kind of explain some of the details behind that, and that kind of ties in with what Aaron said about some of the darker themes in this movie. So we're going to explain all of that, but the first thing that we like to do is to talk about the movie, the ratings, reviews, budget. Aaron, do you want to start?
Yeah, so starting off with just like a quick little summary. Adonis has been thriving in both his career and family, but then a childhood friend shows up and kind of puts a stink in all of that. He just got out of jail. I believe it was 18 years that he was in prison.
That's what he said, yeah.
And it kind of takes throughout the whole movie for us to figure out like what happened between the two of them. But basically those two grew up together. They were like brothers when they were in the group home and stuff growing up. And he came back. Adonis is like, hey man, like, if you ever need anything, you know, let me know. And Jonathan Majors' character, Damien, was like, yeah, get me a title fight. And
it's one thing he wanted.
One thing led to another. He ended up getting the fight. He ended up winning. And then
fighting dirty.
From there, yeah, it went into him kind of putting shame on Creed's name. So Creed got back into the ring.
Yeah, I kind of used him.
What's up.
Yeah, used him in that sense. Now, to touch on something you said and explain it, because you and I were both a little bit murky on this as audience members.
Yes. Especially if you haven't watched the first Creed in a while, but I watched it this week and I still kind of was a little murky on this part.
What we're going to explain is the family ties for Adonis Creed. So why was he in a group home if...
Spoilers on all three movies, by the way.
Yes. Okay, so the Adonis Creed's mother, who we see in the film, is, let's see, Mary Ann Creed. She's played by Felicia Rashad. Now, Mary Ann was married to Apollo Creed from the Rocky movies. Now, Apollo had an affair with an unknown woman who gave birth to Adonis Creed. And Adonis Creed's mother died. We don't know really the details about that, but Adonis kind of had a rough upbringing at this point now. His mother's passed away. I don't know exactly the timeline, but his father passes away. No, his father passed away before he's born
yeah.
Also, yes. So now he's kind of getting involved in groups he shouldn't. He's in the group home. He's meeting these people that are kind of building the foundation for this movie for when he gets involved in kind of criminal-esque adjacent activities. Mm-hmm. And he ends up in juvie And Marianne Creed shows up there, bails him out, and kind of adopts him into her family as her deceased husband's child. So there's no biological relationship between him and Marianne Creed, but that is his mother. He calls her mom. She raised him since he was a young child, and that the bond of a mother and son is absolutely there in every sense. But that was just something in the movie where there's a line where Creed mentions, Dame treated me like a brother more than any of your kids in this house did. So he's saying, I grew up in your house and you had kids that weren't related to me. So those are his half siblings because they're Apollo Creed's children. But that kind of explains that confusion for me, at least. We found that we had to kind of look into that.
It was helpful that we looked it up afterwards because you were right, it was a little murky. But let's kind of dive into some more of the details here. This obviously came out this year, PG-13, 1 hour and 56 minutes long, which is the shortest Creed movie. And then the IMDb rating has it at a 7.4 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes critics, 87%. Audience score is 97% with only 50 reviews. So it's still like coming out and stuff. But so far, everyone loves this movie.
What did we rate it, though? That's what the people really want to know.
That's right. So in our scale, we have 6 different categories that we use to rate the movie. And this kind of helps us have a less biased opinion on how we think the movie went. So we have story. We both rated it a 7.5 out of 10. Acting, Andrew gave an 8.5. I gave an 8. Cinematography, 8.5 for myself, and 9 for Andrew. Sound design, we both were tied at that 7.5. And then, so those were all worth 10. Those are our bigger categories. And then we have set and character design. Out of 5 points, Andrew gave it a 3.5. I gave it a 4. And then rewatchability, which this is a big one for me. How many times out of 5 are you going to rewatch this movie? I said 4. Andrew said 3.5. So that gave us both a 7.9. This is the first time with this system or without this system that we've ever given a movie the same rating. I didn't think this day would ever come. There was no way that we were ever going to agree on a movie, and it was definitely not going to be this one because I had to drag you to the theater to watch this. And a 7.9, that's got to be like the highest rating that we've given as like a group to a movie.
As a matched greeting, as a combined greeting, I'm sure. It's strange because I feel like that we don't ever usually agree to this extent.
Yes.
So
we were very like similar on everything. We were only a point or half a point off on any category.
Also, we did just come from the theater. We're riding the high. The movie was like blood pumping.
Yeah.
So that's definitely playing a little bit of a factor here. Can't totally discount that. But the hype is also, I think, should be taken into account. If the movie was extremely exciting, they did a good job of that.
It's not like we're blowing IMDb out of the water either. They're at a 7.4, so we're 5 points behind, or 0.5 behind. So like we're kind of in the same ballpark.
Well, I'm usually a pretty strict. People tell me that I'm pretty critical. So this is my honest review of the movie.
Yeah.
And I thought it was pretty dang good.
I know that you like a movie, especially when you're watching it and you go, and you start getting your hands together and you're like, let's go.
Was I doing that during this movie?
You did it a few times, And I was like, yes, he's liking this movie. I'm so excited. Let's go.
I will tend to, because I'm like a dramatic person, I tend to have a physical reaction to watching something I really enjoy, that I really like. So I definitely remember at one point in the movie, I think it's when Dame pulled his tooth out. I was like looking away a little bit, rolling forward in my seat. They used this sound effect.
It was so annoying too.
It was so guttural.
I leaned over to say something to you at that point, and then that happened. So I only saw like the ending of it, and oh man, such a cool little detail, right?
Yeah,
just
honestly.
To show like the level of pain that they're going through outside of a cheesy little corner dialogue hype up speech,
It showed how focused and driven Dame was too, because he shook that right off. He didn't think about it. He's
like, oh shoot, that hurt. Putting that back in. Let's go.
I think he spit his tooth into the bucket.
Yeah.
And then just because he only cared about winning that title fight enough to play dirty too.
Yeah.
But this movie is really good. Even just talking about this scene is getting me kind of excited again.
For sure.
About the movie.
The budget is interesting. So for the first Creed, it was $35 million, and it brought in $173.6 million in the box office. And then Creed 2 was a little bit higher of a budget of $50 million and brought in $214.1 million. So steady increases. And then this movie, Creed 3, was $75 million to make, and still to be determined on how much they'll bring in.
As of filming this, it is Friday afternoon, so the movie just came out probably Thursday night.
Yeah, we're fresh on watching it, and it coming out. So I think this will make more than the second one for sure, especially with how good it was.
I think it deserves to. The question is if it will, but the climate...
Do you think it'll make north of $300 million?
I think it should. I expect this movie to fall between 300 and 500 million based on the quality and the budget they put into it.
Yeah.
They use their budget very well. The movie is beautiful.
They did.
It feels like you're watching a high production movie all the way through. From start to finish. I was just kind of blown away at certain points at how clean it was. It was just looking at the ring, like they had a huge crowd. Everything looked crisp, brand new, realistic.
The lighting was awesome. The costume design was awesome. Yeah.
It was all like the set design was, I feel like the theme was new, but with grit. Like it wasn't so new that it took away the grit of the nature of a boxing movie.
Right.
It kind of had that rogue
it still
nature.
kind of fit within the Creed series too, while improving on different aspects.
The movie definitely felt like it highlighted where Adonis kind of came from versus where he is now. Right. They really hit like he talked about, you guys got glass floors up in here. The wealthy lifestyle that Donnie's living now, crazy. But also you see these
They did a good job of showing that.
Yeah.
Because think of like Conor McGregor or something, like what his house and stuff looks like. Like they're rolling in dough, so I think they did a good job of encapsulating that lifestyle of a heavyweight champ.
No, definitely.
But in this beginning part, we talk about like who made the movie and stuff. Most notably, this was Michael B. Jordan's debut for directing.
Oh my gosh, yes.
What'd you think?
I mean, stunning. This is an incredible directorial debut, and
it's crazy that it's his first, right?
Yeah,
it went so well.
Mind-blowing that it's his first, because not only is he directing this huge movie, what was the budget?
It was $75 million.
So a $75 million budget for a first movie. I mean, Tarantino's first movie, Reservoir Dogs, I think was like a couple $1 million in a dream. It wasn't $70 million. So he's stepping into the ring of a huge movie with a lot of staff, also starring in that movie. So he's not just wearing the one hat. And I think Michael B. Jordan carried the weight of that gloriously. To have such a beautiful final product for your first project as a director is so amazing. I think that he could pat himself on the back for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was great. Andrew, who else made this movie happen?
So we have our writers. So interestingly for this movie, the writers are Keenan Coogler and Zach Braylon, with Ryan Coogler returning for story. So story by credit, meaning that he helped work on the concept and story for it, but the screenplay credits for actually writing
Which he directed the first Creed.
Every Creed movie has had a different director. Ryan Coogler.
I think he wrote the first one too, right, Ryan? Yeah,
I think he wrote it in conjunction with Sylvester Stallone. Unless that was a story by credit and I was getting confused. Because sometimes they'll do a story by credit on IMDb for the creation of the character. Because Sylvester Stallone created Rocky Balboa. Yeah,
it says directors Ryan Coogler, writers Ryan Coogler, Aaron Covington, and Sylvester Stallone for the writers. So he's listed third. So I'd imagine that it's kind of like that for creating the character there.
Now, it's really cool that Ryan Coogler is still returning back to this franchise time and time again, working on story with them. Now, the writing, I think, is a huge strength of this movie. But then we'll move on to cinematography. The cinematographer for this movie was Kramer Morgenthau. Also worked on Creed 2 and then some other notable projects: Thor, The Dark World, Terminator Genesis, and Spirited. Now, those might not be the strongest showing of movies, honestly, Terminator Genesis and Thor: The Dark World, but I don't think I would knock those movies for what they look like.
Right.
You agree with that?
Yeah.
So
Fair assessment.
And that's where Morgenthau was involved. So now music was done by Joseph Shirley, who also worked on Book of Boba Fett as a composer, and then has a whole number of other credits in the music compartment, like credits like arranged music for things outside of composer, but still working in the music department.
Right.
A lot of experience, but as a composer, not as long of a list, or maybe as credible of a list. But I walked out of this theater saying to you that the music and the soundtrack was one of the highest strengths of this movie for me. Top 3 strengths, though. The way they timed some of the originally composed music with the action of the movie was so phenomenal. Just little things here and there where I felt the music. I always say that a great thing in a movie there's this pyramid where it's something is bad, so you notice it. Something is good, so you don't notice it. And then even
something's great that you can't help but notice it.
Exactly. So it crosses back into where you notice it again.
Right.
And I feel like that the music in this movie crossed that threshold to the top of the pyramid, where I was noticing the music.
The original scores as well as the song choices that were plugged in.
Yeah, exactly. Both of them. The original music
captured the culture and the mood and the vibe. Got me hyped. I was ready to work out. Yeah, I want to pull up that playlist and listen to it when I'm working out.
The training montage in this movie, that was great song choice. And then it had the reference to
said Wakanda.
To Wakanda in it, which Michael B. Jordan, obviously.
And Ryan Coogler.
Yeah, both work, the director and then the villain of the first Black Panther movie. So that's so cool.
I love when movies throw in like little Easter eggs like that. That's like kind of obvious. It's like, why wouldn't you say something like that? You know, like
why not? Who's it hurt?
Like I really wanted Iron Man and Doctor Strange to say no dip, Sherlock. Like why couldn't that have happened? You know, like it would have been hilarious. Or if someone else said it to both of them while they both said something obvious, like
that's a great idea. You should have been in the writer's room for that. I would have loved that.
That would have been fantastic. And I'm so upset that it never happened. But anyways, who else was involved in this movie?
So moving on to the cast, who's on the other side of the camera. Michael B. Jordan obviously is Adonis Creed. Tessa Thompson is Bianca Creed, his wife, and baby mama.
Which she's had her fair share in the MCU as well.
Oh yeah, our Valkyrie. Yeah. Jonathan Majors is Damian Anderson. That's 3.
Who is also in the MCU.
All 3 of these cast members so far in the MCU. Wood Harris is Tony Burton, or Little Duke. He's a trainer. Mm-hmm. And I just want to shout him out for The Wire because he plays Avon Barksdale in that, and I love him in that show. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Felicia Rashad is Marianne Creed, and then Micah Davis Kent is Amara Creed.
Mila?
Is it an L? Did I mistype it when I wrote it over?
It's an L.
Mila Davis Kent. She's Amara Creed, and she is great in this movie.
Yes.
Incredible child actress.
And she's actually deaf too.
Which we talked about in our Last of Us episode with Sam, as that young actor was deaf. And I think it's really incredible that these big studios and production companies continue to make that choice. Yes. The authenticity is much appreciated. The representation's appreciated, I'm sure, in the deaf community.
In a movie like this, too, where everything is kind of over the top, you know, like these big muscular men, like fighting and all this stuff, you know, like when they go into a scene and it's quiet, you know, like there's very little music going on, if any at all, and they're signing, like it just draws your attention to the moment. Or at least it did for me, you know, it's, I don't know. It felt very powerful.
Yeah, there's a lot about this movie, and maybe that's the last cast member I have. So I want to segue kind of into this conversation with you about the feel of the movie and what these people who were in front of and behind the camera, the feeling they created. And the main thing that I want to say and hear your thoughts on is I thought that they created a very small, tight, close feeling in like a grand big budget movie, while the scale of the movie is a fight for world champion. A lot of the camera work is just these tight shots. Like I turned to you.
I love tight shots.
Yes. You can get so much of the emotion from the actor's face. Yes. And I turned to you and mentioned it specifically in the diner scene where the camera just felt like it was squeezing Donnie and Dame into this little booth, and it felt like they were close. It felt like there was tension.
Were close. But that's what I was gonna say. Like that they're close, but there's tension in the booth there with them.
It's corny to say, but it's like they're so close but so far apart.
Yeah.
Because they're 18 years of life apart and very different lives at that. The life of an extremely successful boxer versus a man who's been in prison the whole time. So the movie drew on that. Like, they milked it in such a good way. I mean that as an absolute compliment.
Yes.
That scene in the diner is great. I love the way that he tries to give him cash, and I think that's kind of a example to us in the writing of Donnie's mindset changing since they were young. You know, that might have been something he wouldn't think to do, or maybe he wouldn't have thought to do it because he didn't have the opportunity to do so as much in his upbringing. But that did definitely look like a handout, and that looks like something that could definitely offend someone. Taking a wad of cash out of your pocket and sliding it across the table, I don't think that's the best way to offer or ask that in that situation. And he pushed it away, and he just Donnie turned on his heels and was like, respect, I understand that. And a lot of the writing and dialogue in this movie I love. Just that simple line of respect and like convey.
Yeah, you can feel the tension and maybe awkwardness in the moment, but it feels like it plays out how it would in real life.
Exactly.
You know, like there wasn't any like cheesy lines thrown in there to like, I don't know, show something or tell something that's being shown.
He didn't overly fumble with like the money and like overly embarrass, react to it. It was just, it's micro reactions. It's a great acting.
Yeah. But at the same time, he was like, oh, like to me, it felt like he was like, oh, like, why wouldn't you take this? You know, like respect. Like it kind of threw me off that you didn't take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the subtleties in the.
But he showed us that the only thing he really cares about is that shot at the title. He doesn't want money.
Right.
He wants the life that was taken from him.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of salt towards Creed as well. You want to kind of go into their dynamic a little bit?
Hold on. The last thing I want to say, because we were touching on the tightness of the story, is I wanted to harken back to what you mentioned, where that the manner of them making these characters deaf, it definitely adds to that feeling of them being tight, because it's when they're communicating in sign language, even in a big crowd like in the stadium, it's as if they're the only ones in there. And again, like that scene where they literally remove the audience, the whole movie is about these relationship dynamics, and it makes it small. And that is what I love about a good movie like this, when it's big in scale, but they bring it down to something personal that we all can identify with, families, regrets, they crushed it. I felt the emotionality. I felt like the tight dynamic of these characters, whether
something that this movie had that the first two didn't, in my opinion, is that just connection on screen with the villain. Like the first two villains or opponents, I don't know, I just didn't feel like invested in them personally. Like I
like the concept of Victor Drago, but it's, what is your beef really with the son of the guy who is the one you should really be upset with? I guess is maybe the disconnect.
Yeah, and
Ivan Drago
in that movie too, Drago didn't talk.
No.
So like at no point did I like feel like, I don't know, sorry for him or connected to him, or like in no way was I like, I kind of like this guy.
Yeah, something
like I kind of feel for him.
Something you taught me, right, was that since Rocky V, they've had a trend of having real fighters portray the villains. So that's might be a part of why he got less dialogue, because he's a fighter more so than an actor.
Maybe. But yeah, I think that's the biggest difference, is that Jonathan Majors is an actor first.
Oh my God.
And man, did he show it. Yeah. Like he can definitely pass as a boxer, but he's for sure an actor first.
Every scene where Michael B. Jordan was talking to Jonathan Majors, I was locked in with the conversation.
Absolutely.
Like especially on the beach, especially that phone call when he was on the sports channel.
Yep.
I was going to say Sports Center, but I'm not sure which one it really was.
No, it was Let's Talk or Real Talk or something. Thank you, everyone, for listening to our podcast, Backseat Directing. We're excited to keep doing this, and to kind of build up a community. We said it on some of our other episodes, but we're over 300 subscribers on YouTube, which is fantastic. Like we haven't even been doing this that long, but at the same time, we're at like mid 60s in episodes, which. That's a lot of episodes, isn't it?
Yeah, comparatively, our end of the year Wrapped showed that we were like in the top what percent of
like
content
95%
of content creators when we had just started in like August, or we only had a few months under our belt.
We put out 2 a week every Monday and Thursday. You can check the full episodes out on YouTube or Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever else you'll find your podcast. We'll be there. We're on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening. So the next thing that we are going to go into is the relationship dynamic between our hero and villain in this movie. It's everything to this movie.
Yeah,
so
this is how we'll kind of summarize the entire movie, is like through their relationship.
Yes.
So starting back when they were young.
At the end of that, we will talk about why Rocky is not in this movie.
Yes.
Kind of tease that a little
tuned.
bit. So it starts out with a flashback. Now, grown up in Crenshaw.
Which you called, by the way.
Yeah, we were outside.
We weren't running late to the theaters. We just weren't there as early as we normally get. And you were like, don't worry. If we don't see the beginning, it's probably just a flashback. Blah, blah, blah. And it started off flashback.
There's certain ways you can tell. I mean, from the trailer of this movie, it was leading to that. Yeah. But it started with Donnie and Dame as young kids. They go into a big fight that Dame has as a kid because he's like a Golden Gloves champ as like a young teenager.
Seemed like kind of like an underground fight.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was like above board. It's the way they were going into the building, I feel like, was kind of sketchy. Yeah. Like it seemed like maybe they knew somebody and were getting in on the slide. And then I found out he was like the title fight that night. And I was like, interesting. But, Dame has a lot of promise. And what we don't know till later in the movie, because we get this flashback
best
piece by
boxer
piece,
or whatever,
up and coming in the world, basically. Mm-hmm. And all that promise gets flushed away because they have this encounter. And I'll warn you guys again, we are spoiling the movie if we haven't said enough so far. But Donnie meets Leon, a man who was in a group home that Donnie and Dame grew up in, and Leon used to abuse the children physically. And Donnie's got a lot of pent-up aggression from that, so he attacks him. And then when Leon's...
it was a crazy encounter, too. Like, he was coming out of a gas station as Donnie was heading in, and he was like, Leon? And he turned around.
You don't remember me?
What? It's like, you don't remember me? And he's like on his phone or like scratch-off tickets or something. And he just wham! Right to the face, knocks him to the ground.
Not so little now, am I?
Yeah. He was probably, what?
He was young. He was still young. He wasn't.
Or so, yeah.
He wasn't large, but he was just. I think he's had some fighting training already.
That and just
rage.
being surprised too. Yeah. Like getting hit in the face when you're not paying attention. Yeah. Even when you're paying attention, like that hurts.
But man, it's a great emotional scene, especially looking back when you understand the motivation behind it, and.
Yeah, because they reveal it very slowly.
Piece by piece. I appreciated that.
Yeah, me too.
Playing with time.
It keeps you interested in the conflict that's happening in the present time, because you're wanting to know like why all of this like tension is between these two characters.
And he has a child who looks like she's in elementary school with Bianca at this point. And this is a part of his past that tortures him so much he hasn't even shared it with her. So that's kind of biting at you the whole time you're watching it, is who is Leon? What did Leon do to him? Mm-hmm. But he gets pulled off of Leon when he's a young kid by Leon's boys, they say basically.
Yep.
And then
Damien
really, as a true friend, steps in, has his back, and
pulls a gun on him. So like, get off my boy.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I feel like you can appreciate, even if you might not appreciate the fact that he had a gun. Maybe he shouldn't have had a gun, and that's why he got in trouble. But he's trying.
Well, if the cops didn't show up and he didn't have a gun, Adonis would have been like...
He could have been killed.
Yeah, it could have been, for sure. There was 2 guys on top of him, and they were probably both older than him. Yeah. So he was probably...
There was about to be 3 guys, probably, when Leon got up. So the thing is, that's the complicated nature of the story that you touched on already, is he was only in that situation to protect Adonis, whereas definitely he could have been in a million different situations. Dame definitely seemed like he kind of was hot-headed and could have gotten into trouble another way, but in the specific situation where he got arrested and went down for, he was trying to save his friend, basically little brother is what he looked at him as, trying to save him.
Adonis ended up running away before the cops got out.
He got away. Dame didn't, and that's where all the tension comes from between these two characters.
And he went to jail for 18 years.
Can you explain why he went to jail for 18 years for that? For pointing a gun at somebody? I feel like 18 years is like a heavy, like...
I think they said that he got time added on. Did they not?
Because he said something, right? He said something about 4 years, and I was going to ask you about that. He must have, time added for fighting or something would be my guess for Dame fighting in prison.
I'm sure he got charged with the...
unlawful possession, brandishing
of a firearm.
Like, it's basically assault, threatening with a weapon.
Yeah.
Some places consider that assault.
Right, but then it's also battery, too, because he probably got charged for beating up Leon.
And we don't know what else he did, if he resisted arrest or something other charges they could have tacked onto him that could have made this
But I'm
bigger
assuming
number.
he got the charges for beating up Leon.
Yeah, but it's just crazy because he said he had a rap sheet, too. That probably didn't help.
Yes.
But he's young. I know what a lot of people are going to be screaming while we're saying this is, he's black. That's why he got that many years. But
yeah,
I mean,
for sure, that's a factor. It is.
I can hear that in the background. I can hear Corey.
Okay. You're right.
But anyways, the point being going forward is that he lost his life. He was maybe 18 at the time and spent the next 18 years of his life in prison while, yes, everything may not have been a cakewalk for Adonis from then moving forward, but through struggles and trials, he built himself up to an incredible position in life.
And, I mean, even when he was in juvie or wherever in the first Creed and kind of got adopted by his stepmom or whatever, like, she's a millionaire. So, like, he definitely had a different upbringing than Damien for sure. Even though he made his own name, which is like the whole theme of Creed 1 and 2, But he had an advantage for sure, even over most people, even over us in a sense, like
he had a legacy and he had a mother with a lot of money.
Right.
A state.
An interesting line that was in the movie is like, what do you mean you can't just get the title fight? You are not even a pro yet. And Damien's like, yeah, but that's what happened to you, isn't it? Like, and that's true. One of his first fights was the title fight. Because his name was Creed.
His dad's Apollo Creed, and he's getting trained by Rocky Balboa. Yeah. It was like two of the biggest names in boxing in this world.
Big fights like this, it's all about like draw, like that's what boxing seems to be all about, like even with the brothers, Jake Paul.
Yeah, they got a shot for what? Yeah,
they're making stupid money boxing and stuff, but it's because they bring so much attention to it.
But like the thing is, I was watching this movie at the point where Dame does get his shot, and they're letting him fight the champ without having a single professional boxing match. I was thinking, this is unrealistic that they threw him in. But then they showed the Showtime promo, and then I was thinking, man, can I pay for a pay-per-view to watch this fight?
Yeah.
They're built, the way they built him up as an underdog is he like just got out of prison.
Mysterious.
He's been waiting for his shot.
You don't know what's gonna happen.
He's built. He looks huge and strong. That was enough to put people in seats. At that point, I believed it, that they could put an audience in seats based off that. He didn't need the experience once they showed that promo.
Yeah, definitely. So let's kind of work our way up to that point. So randomly one day outside of Creed's gym, Damien shows up and is like, here I am. So they go to that diner, like we already mentioned, with all the tight shots, and they kind of talk. Adonis Creed tries to give the handout of money, and he's like, no, like, I don't need that, like.
If there's anything I can do to help you, just let me know. Don't be afraid to ask.
And then eventually he kind of shows his true mission or desire is that he wants his chance at the title fight. And Creed's like, that can't happen, like. So then Dame starts. It just doesn't work that way.
Dame starts trying to guilt him into it by continually bringing it up, explaining his reasoning. And beyond that, what we know after watching the whole movie is that he's manipulating him more than with words. He's scheming behind the scenes to eliminate the fight that Donnie has set up right now for his fighters. So he gets Ivan Drago. He has one of his old prison associates attack Ivan Drago, so he's injured. And now Donnie's looking for somebody to replace Drago in the big fight. They've got a big fight set up. They got a venue set. They got a lot of money involved in this. They need somebody to fight his champ.
Yeah, that was the title fight.
Yeah. So for the heavyweight title, for the heavyweight belt for the world.
Right.
And so he's desperate now. The other contenders aren't looking too good. One's coming off a fight. Maybe the other one's injured. And that's when Donnie's finally going to turn to the guy who's been in his ear the whole time, Dame, to give him his shot.
Yeah. And like you said, at first you're like, this wouldn't even happen. And the Felix was the heavyweight champion at the time, and he was who was supposed to go up against Drago, and he's looking for someone else to fight. And his mom was like, who's going to go watch this fight with Damien, you know? And that's kind of where it goes into Adonis being like, oh, trust me, people are going to come watch this, you know, because that's his job now. Like he's trying to get his champ this money, this publicity, you know, like trying to build up the fight. And since he knows the other guy too, like he's going to make sure that this fight gets acknowledged and that people are going to be excited. And that's where we go into that Showtime presenting or like feature of the fight. And you're right, it was hype. It was definitely, it was like, can we go watch this fight? Like, is this Saturday night? Like, I'm ready to go, you know? So then Damien ends up fighting Felix for the fight, for the heavyweight champion. And it's interesting because Adonis kind of has a hand in both corners. He
really seems to be more heavily in his champ's corner than Dame's.
For sure.
He's coming up to him at the sideline. He's cheering for him at the side, telling him to keep his hands up.
No, he definitely wants him to win because he's training at his gym. He's like his champ, you know, like he's endorsing this guy basically, you know. But at the same time, that's like basically his ex-brother, if you will, you know.
I don't think he's necessarily rooting against him. He comes to his locker room specifically.
Right. Which, do you want to talk about that shot?
Oh, that's one of my favorite shots in the movie. Probably my favorite, like, still shot.
Yeah.
Is he comes into the locker room, he kind of gives little words of support to Dame, and then when Donnie leaves, there's this wall separating them. Donnie's backlit by this blue light, and Dame's backlit by this, like, harsher, maybe white light, you know? Mm-hmm. It's not as warm. It's cold white light, and they both turn to the center of the screen and looking through the wall kind of at where the other person would be, and they freeze, and then the shot kind of cuts away as they're walking away. I think it's kind of showing us
it's like
the
relationship that used to be.
The other thing I think that is really good symbolism in this is physically they're very close together, but there is a wall between them. So while they might be just a few feet apart, there's still this barrier that exists between the two of them on a physical and metaphorical level. And it's beautiful cinematography. I mean,
that was one of the parts in the movie where you looked over at me and you're like,
this is
awesome.
Great. Yeah. I looked over at you early on too. I don't remember what it was, but I was like, this movie's going to be good.
I remember what it was.
Yeah.
I think it was that first fight. Either the clap transition or the first fight where Creed is still fighting, you know, and then there's like the slow motion, almost like Sherlock Holmes kind of feature where he looks and sees that the guy he's fighting kind of has a little hitch. You can kind of see his lat or whatever. And it's like the slow motion, kind of like anime, you know, like pausing, freezing time. And then he's like hitting it. And when he's hitting, it's like it's slow motion. It's like he's dodging the punches being thrown. Like, maybe that's not the first time you looked at me, but I definitely looked at you during that part. And I was like, this is a good movie.
They know how to use slow motion in this movie. Because there's definitely too much. And there's a possibility to use too much, is what I'm saying.
Right.
But in this
not too much in this one.
In this movie, they use it the right way.
It's used very tastefully, for sure. And in the first two, Creed 1 and 2, they had slow motion shots, but they weren't nearly as artistic as these. These, like, added to the story. I think in the other movies, it kind of just tried to show the impact a little bit more, rather than, like, adding to what's going on in their mind. Yeah. You know?
It still was used to make you feel a heavy punch, but in this one, like you said, it added more to the story. It added a feeling, and it added kind of insight into his like boxer's mind, his boxing IQ. So I think that was a really cool addition. But we're moving forward from the fight. That Dame wins. Dame uses kind of dirty tricks that I don't know how refs would let somebody get away with this.
It happens though.
He throws an intentional elbow. How is that only 2 points off?
2 points, I think, is pretty big in boxing.
I know, but you could really mess somebody up with the elbow. They're wearing gloved hands.
I don't know how
sharp elbow.
How the scoring system works in boxing, but I think 2 points is a pretty big penalty. And he like just barely elbowed him too, like enough to where it's like, oh, that was dirty, but not enough to be like disqualified right away. you know? Like, he definitely knew what he was doing to bend those rules. And like you said to me in the theater, like, did you see how he churned his opponent, churned Felix, and like kicked him or kneed him without the ref seeing? Like, he was definitely bending the rules and trying intentionally, you know, mess with Felix, you know?
Yeah.
And like, that happens in sports, not just like fighting sports, but even like football and stuff, you know, like there's holding on like every play if you slow it down and watch and stuff. But if you do it, you know, in like a sly way, like you're going to get away, you can get away with it.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It's been a while since I played sports. What I played was soccer. And I guess if I think back to it, a lot of the game is kind of what you can get away with.
Yeah.
And especially in like a defensive
every
position.
Ref and reffing group, if it's like a big team sport, like is a little different on how they enforce the rules and how harsh they are and strict they are with things, you know?
Yeah. And then in non-contact sports or non-primary contact sports, a lot of it is you get what you give, you know?
Right.
And it's about what the ref can see and what the ref decides to call based on how much each side is pushing the other. So I guess, I mean,
in soccer, sometimes I would run up and like intentionally just try to hit them really hard when I made contact, keeping my arms in close though, you know, just kind of stun them a little bit.
It's a tough line to draw in a sport like boxing though, where both sides are trying to kill each other.
Right.
It's like they're both trying to give 100%. So
it's more important when a penalty is missed for sure, or more impactful for sure. And there was definitely a few missed in this fight, which Damian ends up winning, which is not good for Adonis Creed. One, because that's his fighter, his champ that just lost. He's supposed to still fight Drago eventually.
He's also really badly injured, his champ. It's not just a loss, but he leaves in an ambulance and he was KO'd.
Right.
Not in a stumble back up off the canvas and walk out with the crowd cheering kind of way, in a leave with paramedics kind of way.
And right after this, right when he gets back from the hospital, Creed, when he gets back from the hospital, Felix is still there, staying there overnight. He goes over to his mom's, and his mom pulled out all the letters that Damian wrote him while he was in jail. And Damian said that back at the booth, like, hey, I wrote you and you like never reached out, man. And
there's a lot of pages for never getting a response.
They made it seem like, or Damian made it seem like he wrote a few times, you know, but like there was, I don't know, tens of pages there, you know, and I'm assuming each page was an individual letter that was sent, some with pictures and stuff. And that's where he found out that the guy who hurt Drago, who was going to fight Felix, got injured by his prison associate friend.
Yeah.
Because there was a picture in those letters that showed. But this was also where there was some tension between Adonis and his mom, you know, because he was upset that she kept these letters from him.
But he lets go of that real quick, because one of the next things that we see in the movie is Marianne Creed is passing away. She's had a subsequent stroke that is leading to multiple organ failure. And he comes to her bedside in a really emotional scene where she starts to see him as his father, Apollo, and talk to him as Apollo. And that
was pretty emotional.
Very well acted scene. Yeah. Very, very sad.
I was definitely feeling it too, because then you realize like, oh wow, their last conversation together, they left angry.
Yeah.
You know, and like,
I hate that. Yeah. Happens in movies all the time.
It does. And sometimes when I'm upset with someone, or like even with my wife or whatever, you know, and it's like, I'm so mad right now, but it's like,
bye.
I need to change this though, because what if I die after this?
Yeah.
You know, like
it's morbid, but I think the same way. Yeah. I think my whole family does, because we always say like multiple I love yous before we leave a family gathering.
Yeah.
And I think we all kind of have that subtext of what if they drive out of here and get in a car accident, as morbid as it is.
Right.
You know, it's just kind of an underlying thought. You want to leave a good taste in everybody's mouth, especially people you care about the most.
It was a sweet moment though, because when his mom thought that Adonis was actually Apollo, she was saying that Adonis helped her forgive Apollo, you know, for not being there anymore.
Yeah, she never held it against him,
right?
Which I can see some people doing. It's a horrible thing, but blaming the child that was born out of the affair, and she really seemed like she poured all her love into him instead, and raised him as her own son. So there's a lot of emotionality in that story. I'm glad that they included it in this movie. I think this is a good point for us to touch on the darkness in this movie, and maybe touch on what Sylvester Stallone had to say about it.
Yeah, for sure. So this is the first movie that Sylvester Stallone is not in for a Rocky franchised movie.
He was in 8 of them before now.
8 of the 9. This was the 9th movie.
He wrote the original movie, creating the character Rocky Balboa.
And I saw somewhere that he got paid for the first movie like $75,000, and that's for like the acting and producing credits and for the rights to the story.
Yeah. So Sylvester Stallone's net worth nowadays is around $400 million estimated, and it would, from what I've read, it would definitely be basically $1 billion if he had ownership of the Rocky IP.
Dang, that's crazy.
Because it's I saw it described as the most profitable franchise, the most profitable sports movie franchise in history. Yeah, so definitely it's got to leave a bad taste in your mouth when he is very successful and very rich, but the way to hear Rocky talk about it, to hear Sylvester Stallone talk about it in real life as he is known, it kind of seems like he feels it was a loss of like a nest egg for his family. He has a lot to leave his family and future generations and to leave trusts, but this just feels like something that was taken away from his children and grandchildren in a way.
I can understand, like if you were to create a story that was very successful, even a story that's not successful, but something that's close to your heart, like you're going to have an attachment to that, and like
the tough thing is
you're going to be protective of it.
He chose to sell it. And even if you can argue that he was kind of duped in a way because he was desperate to sell a script and have a big role.
I think that's just kind of how things were back then too.
Yeah. He also made out pretty well because this movie built his career and is the reason he has $400 million in the bank now.
Right.
But I can definitely respect his position on it. And basically,
like if he didn't do that, would this movie have even gotten made?
Yeah. I think, what was the gentleman's name? Phil Irwin? The producer who he has beef with?
Believe so. Why don't you look that up and I'll read this quote that I have from him.
Go ahead.
So this is what Stallone had to say. That it's a regretful situation because I know what could have been. It was taken in a direction that was quite different than what I would have taken it. Stallone told Hollywood Reporter. It's a different philosophy. Erwin Winkler and Michael B. Jordan. It's a different philosophy, meaning those two. I wish them well, but I am much more sentimentalist. I like my heroes getting beaten up, but I don't want them going into that dark space. I just feel like people have enough darkness, is what he had to say about kind of the tone and direction that this movie went.
In a sense, he's not wrong. The world does have plenty enough darkness in it, but I still like my movies dark, and I like what they added into this movie, the loss, the darkness in the backstory of his childhood, and I thought it really added to the emotionality and made it a better movie.
A little more relatable.
Yeah, I felt the grit. It felt less... there definitely were some moments in Creed 2 that I thought were very corny, and most of them centered around Sylvester Stallone. I kind of feel like this improved the Creed trilogy, the lack of Sylvester Stallone in the movie, even though I love the guy. Great action star.
Don't mean it as any disrespect to him, but I totally agree. I feel like a lot of the cheesiness was wrapped around him in the first two. The first one, I get it. The second one probably could have had less. And then this third one, I'm glad that there was none.
Well, there's been less Rocky in each of the Creed movies. He was featured less in 2, and now he's gone. Another thing I noticed that I actually thought was really cool, it seemed planned, even though now it seems like it wasn't. If you look at the posters of the Creed movies, it slowly fades Rocky into the background, I think to my mind symbolizing the passing of the torch. And in the first Creed poster, they're side by side looking into each other's eyes. In the second poster, Rocky's in the background behind the ropes while Creed is standing in front of them. And in the third poster, it's now just Adonis Creed, to me symbolizing him now taking the torch and being, he's the new Balboa. It's Apollo Creed. It's Adonis Creed now.
Yeah. I don't think that was intentional after hearing kind of his beef go on.
It worked out.
But yeah, exactly. I feel like the first, it just didn't click as much for me. And I'm not like the biggest Rocky fan either, you know, like they're good, but I think this third Creed is the best in the franchise.
I liked Rocky a lot, definitely growing up. When I was a kid, I had 2 pet turtles. I named them Cuff and Link because that's what Rocky named his pets in the first Rocky movie.
Yeah.
And so I loved rewatching Rocky as a kid. I liked the big fight at the end, you know, the hero winning. That's something that is very heartwarming, and that's what he's touching on, is like the basic purity of those kind of stories. I feel like is kind of what he grew up with in the movies he made. But people are looking for a darker side now.
Yeah.
You know, more so than in the 80s.
Feels a little more updated.
70s. More
you know,
what?
More updated.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Like,
yeah.
Like we're past the 70s and 80s now, you know, and like
feels more modern, especially with Sylvester Stallone out of the movie.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, maybe I don't like the way of how it all ended up, but I think in terms of just it being the movie, it was better this way.
Absolutely. And I can see a lot of his points. He thinks that they're taking something he created that he's sentimental to, and they're going a different direction than he envisioned when he created it. Makes sense. He's also said they're trying to wring every last drop of money out of it by now doing like a Drago spinoff, which I can kind of agree there's no need for a Drago spinoff.
Which I don't think that's been confirmed, or there's no scripts written for it or anything.
Yeah, nothing hard written in stone. But Sylvester Stallone has no beef with Michael B. Jordan, so you all can rest easy knowing that he's on good terms with Michael B. Jordan, and I think that the two have respect for each other. But I was surprised to see Jordan directing this movie with Balboa not involved. And I switched from Rocky to still call him his fictional name with Stallone not involved. But it seems like, from what I'm reading, a lot of the angles, Stallone's issues with the producers and with the rights, even though he's been kind of not felt strongly enough to drop out, and for some reason until the 9th movie, it seems like he chose to drop out for that reason. Yeah. On his own terms. It basically is what I'm reading from it.
So kind of jumping back into the movie's plot and story, Damien ends up winning. He's now the heavyweight champ, and he's throwing shade on Creed's name, you know, and basically saying that he's a fraud, saying that he's not loyal, and all this other stuff. Creed gets upset. They confront each other and have this like altercation on the beach.
Yeah, the beach scene is a really great scene in the movie, and it's another example of them, something you said that this franchise needed, which is them throwing punches outside of the ring.
Yes.
So we've got the fight in the beginning and the flashback. They both trade punches with somebody on the beach, and I believe there's other instances in the movie as well, but they finally injected that into the franchise.
Yes.
Good call on that, by the way.
I was very excited for that. I was hoping for maybe a little bit more of stuff, like maybe going to the ground or something, you know? But that was enough. I'm happy that was included a little bit in there. It made it seem real, like they want to fight each other, you know, like rather than it just being like staged, you know, like politically, like you're gonna fight, you know, because of your names, like. But yeah, so anyways, he actually ends up, Creed has this kind of theme throughout the whole movie of not being good at sharing his feelings, you know, and especially feelings of like hatefulness and anger. And that's partially why he got into boxing in the first place, as like a release for that, as an outlet. But his wife, Bianca, is confronting him and asking him like, what's going on, you know, and he's got the bloody eye from the beach the night before and stuff, and they have this real scene together where it's just like raw emotion, and it felt very relatable, because I kind of feel like I'm the same way in some instances, you know, where I like to hold some of my anger feelings close to the chest, you know. Maybe don't like to talk about certain things, especially if I'm not ready to talk about them. And they kind of had the same conversation, because she found out about what's the dad's name?
Apollo?
No,
Leon.
Leon, yeah. She found out about Leon from Damien and asked Adonis about it, because Adonis has never shared any of this with her. and they kind of start yelling at each other back and forth. And something that I liked that they did in the scene was that they were both yelling at the same time, you know, because
it's a real fight. Yeah.
You know, like it felt very natural back and forth. And then at the same time, and then their daughter shows up, and then it's like real.
Yeah. And I totally feel that it's kind of this really intense emotion that I feel like must be running through Adonis's head, because you never want to see that little girl. Their daughter's name is Mara. He never wanted to see Amara looking at him like that with fear, and he never wants her to see the worst side of himself. And so I just thought that was really intense. And B said, she can't see you like this. You have to figure out a different outlet for your emotions. And she's right. And as she's walking away, he signs, I love you to her. So it's like there's still that real dad in him. Like these characters do feel really real. And even in that intense state, right after she leaves, he like smashes something on the table. He still signs I love you to her as she walks away, because that's something he needs to convey to his daughter. And he doesn't want her to be afraid of him. He doesn't want... It's really well written, the way that they decided to go about it.
So this is basically in live television. They end up calling each other out, and they end up agreeing to fight.
Where they say my favorite line in the movie. He challenges Dame to a fight, and Dame says, let's go. And Creed says, run it.
Boom.
Run
mic
it.
Drop.
Oh.
Literally took out the earpieces.
And walked away.
Oh
my gosh. The music starts playing.
Dude, could you imagine being the host of that show? Just like, yeah!
Did he just say, run it?
The camera's on. Let's go.
Dude, that scene went so hard. It was really, really...
And it cuts right into the beginning of the training montage, which every Rocky movie, every Creed movie needs to have. The last one was a little lackluster, I think, in Creed 2. I enjoyed Creed 2, but them going to the desert like to trains, like
that part kind of felt
it kind of felt forced.
One of the things that felt corny to me in that movie as well. But this fight scene has a great soundtrack, like we already talked about. That's where we get the Wakanda reference, and both of them are training. Dame just looks like a demon. He's just knocking guys down to the canvas left and right, yelling at people, saying, "Get out of here!" Then like. He's a monster, dude. He's a real monster. And then all this to build up to the epic final fight.
And Drago comes back to help train Creed.
Yes.
Which was really cool, right?
I was so excited to see
like you said, they didn't have the beef.
Yeah.
It was mainly Rocky and...
Rocky and Drago.
Yeah, they had
Ivan.
The beef. Yeah. So
Victor comes back and helps Creed get into fighting shape for this biggest fight of the trilogy.
Right.
And... man, it's what the movie needs. The Rocky movies need that intense training montage, and then they need to close with like a big fight. That needs to be the best part of the movie.
Drago had more lines in this one than he did in Creed 2.
Yeah, probably. But that big fight is, I think, the best scene in the movie, which is how it should be. And it has a lot of...
It was so cool.
Has a lot of Michael B. Jordan as a filmmaker injected into it, which I really appreciated.
The other two fights were pretty good, but they kind of just gave us a taste for what's in store for the finale, which was so good.
You taught me that this fight was inspired by one of my favorite anime fights of all time.
Yep.
Because Michael B. Jordan's a big Naruto fan. Even if you watch the video online, he says Naruto. It's fine. It's okay. I forgive you. But he's a big Naruto fan, and he showed Jonathan Majors this fight scene. It's from Naruto. It's from the Fourth Great Ninja War. Towards the end of Naruto Shippuden, we see Naruto fight... No, I'm sorry. Excuse me. We see Kakashi fight Tobi. So, also called Obito. So, Obito Uchiha. And God, this fight is probably my favorite anime fight. They get teleported with the Kamui into this alternate dimension that's just empty, and they just brawl. It's a lot of hand-to-hand combat, which isn't as common in some animes. Is like actually mixing the ninjutsu with taijutsu, throwing blows, and then the big thing, they're cutting back and forth between a fight they had when they were little kids, when they were like children fighting and training, and they're lining it up perfectly to transition back and forth with these fights, and the emotionality is there. The visuals are stunning, and they touched into this big final fight scene, because they cut back to Donnie and Dame seeing each other as the childhood versions of each other. And then they do this moment where the whole crowd disappears and it's just the two of them. Cutting back to what we were talking about, where the movie has this very tight, close, emotional nature to a big scale fight. And it's just empty arena, just the two of them fighting, and it's quiet. And then they have this operatic music coming in that I feel like played so well. I was like shaking in my seat, feeling that flow, the shrill opera flow through you, this intense moment. And then he hits him back against the bars to the prison cell, and he hits him back against the mattress punching bag that they made when they were kids. And we were talking in the car. I'm so excited about this, by the way, if you can't hear it in my voice. But we were talking in the car how a lot of filmmakers don't seem to understand that nowadays, that the audience will be on board if you put in a metaphor. None of us are confused. We don't think the crowd disappeared. We understand that the crowd is still there, but this is what they're feeling. The characters are feeling that they're the only two people in the world right now. They're the only two people in the stadium, and they are trading blow for blow, these heavy hits. Crazy, by the way. Round 12, they both have an unbelievable amount of energy, and the hits are landing so hard. But it's
to finish round 11, both of them punched in the face, same time. Both of their bodies showing towards us. So I think Damien had the right, Creed had the left, and they're flying to the side. What an awesome freeze frame
that's
there.
the Rocky II photo finish. That's an homage to the fight between Sylvester Stallone and Apollo Creed at the end of the movie. But I love that it was anime inspired, and that's where I really felt like, man, how is he coming into his own as a director in his first debut movie? It was his own personal touch. It was stellar. It was amazing. He injected the culture of a community of California, of Crenshaw into this movie too.
Wasn't too far into your face.
Yeah, and then he also, a small thing, but there was Naruto posters up in young Adonis's room, which we know, like I said, that Michael B. Jordan's a Naruto fan, so he threw that in there. He injected himself into the movie, which is what a good experienced director should do. But even without experience, he's out here killing it. So I respected that a ton. That fight scene was beautiful. And I wish more movies would touch in on the fact that, yes, it's a realistic movie in a real world. They're fighting. They're humans. But it's also a film.
Symbolism.
So put a film into it. Put a metaphor into it. It's okay.
Yeah.
I really, really love that touch.
Created new dynamics that we didn't see in the first two Creed movies.
Absolutely.
Or in the Rocky movies, really. So we did a fight scene draft a while ago.
Yes.
And I remember before we actually made our picks, you're like, if anyone picks a boxing fight from a movie, they automatically lose because those fights suck, especially compared to a full-on fight, where people are fighting for their lives in these other fight scenes. But these fight scenes were awesome.
Well, it's I said that probably because boxing fights are inherently limited.
Yeah.
And there's literally in a box.
Right.
And now, but with this movie, they freed themselves from that by going outside the realm of reality just a little bit and just that toe out. And it was so effective for me.
And seeing Damien push the rules a little bit too, it was refreshing. He wasn't just this mean bad guy. Yeah. He was intentional. He when they were doing the training montage and he was standing up by the TV watching Creed's fights and studying him. Yeah. That was really cool. He's doing research.
They showed the mind of a fighter too.
Right. Definitely. Yes. But then something that I noticed in this one that I felt was kind of missing from the first two, and is more of a critique on the second one than the first one, is that I actually felt like Creed was a dangerous boxer in this movie. I felt like, oh shoot, he can win. In the second one, I didn't really feel that. Drago's a monster over top of this guy, and then the first one, he got beat up a bunch, I feel
like it was also the dialogue in this movie though. In the second movie,
he felt more confident. He felt like he wasn't relying on Rocky to tell him that he's good. Or tell him that he can do this.
If I were to draw a parallel between two lines, it would be Creed 2, where Donnie says, "I'm dangerous." And it sounds like he's asking to be dangerous. And then this movie where he says, "Run it." And he's like, "Let's go."
Yes.
There's not a quiver in his voice. He's a fighter through and through. And I definitely feel like this was a big step up.
Yeah, I definitely felt the weight behind him as a fighter
And plus
in this movie. And he was going up against someone, an opponent, a villain that I felt this same authority from.
Absolutely.
So it was like two forces going head to head that it's like, I really don't know how this is going to end. I had a feeling, obviously, that Creed's going to win the fight. But, like, in terms of each round and stuff, it was believable to me that anything could happen.
I think you touched on a really good compliment to Jonathan Majors, which is he brought the same intensity as Victor Drago, even with the difference in stature, because Victor Drago is a giant.
Yeah.
And even though Jonathan Majors is huge in terms of his strength and physicality, he's not as tall, and he still brought the same presence, the same strength. But the end of the movie I really liked as well. After we see him win that climactic fight scene with that awesome empty stage fight, we go to the locker room, and it's so touching. I was so glad that they forgave each other. The lines, I think, were something like Donnie says, he's like, he basically apologizes, and Dame says that you were a kid, it wasn't your fault. And Donnie says, you were a kid too, it wasn't your fault either. And God, man, these grown, super buff dudes with their eyes tearing up, I was feeling a lot of emotions and a lot of catharsis in the fact that they kind of mended their bond. And, despite everything, Dame got his chance to be the champ. He was still the world heavyweight for however long he was.
Yeah, and he's still going to get fights, for sure.
Yeah, with that publicity, he's still, And plus, he's living good anyway. You saw the house he was living in when he made that phone call.
Yeah, he made millions.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think that this movie was great. I would want to touch on our backseat directing segment real quick.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Our backseat directing is where we sit in the director's chair and talk about what we would change about the movie, what we would keep. You've heard plenty of what we would keep. We praise this movie all the live long day, but the number one thing I would keep is that fight scene at the end where the crowd is gone. The number one thing that I would change if I had to dig for a critique would be, I feel like there was kind of a mix up of themes in this movie where I feel like they were trying to convince me that Donnie has found his reasons for fighting, and that's his family, but he's retired and he's good with his family. So I guess something they were also showing to us through Bianca was the pain of giving up on your passion. And he's not out of the world of boxing, but he's not doing what he loves anymore. He's not fighting. So they're kind of showing that warring torment in him. And obviously he's got to fight because it's a boxing movie and it's his movie. It's called Creed. But I kind of feel like they told us early in the movie, boxing's not about violence. It's about timing and focus. And his time was up. And he chose to go back into the violence when it's somebody who's like a brother to him. I feel like there were other routes to solve that, but I'm glad they fought still because it was epic.
Yeah. I feel like I wouldn't change.
I just feel like he went back into the fight out of vengeance, like out of him basically talking crap about him, which I feel like wasn't a strong enough reason. When what I said was I wish that they had added in another fight where Dame continued to play dirty and his motivation was, all right, this guy is talking crap about me and my family, but he's also now he's disgracing the sport that I love by fighting dirty and getting away with it. So I'm going to show him how we win. And then I wish that he ran in there with that mentality. That I think could have been an improvement.
See, I don't like that because then it kind of makes you like Jonathan Majors' character, Damien, a little bit less, because he's like constantly, well,
it's the only way
cheating the game.
The only way he became the world champion with so little experience was from doing that.
Right.
I'm sure he would have done it if he had the chance again.
But that wasn't as prominent in the fight against Creed.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like it being shown in that one first fight a little bit, and yeah, sure, maybe he does it a little bit in the Creed fight too. I think they. At one point, Creed's like, hey, ref, but it wasn't as bad as it was in that first fight. I don't know. I'm kind of okay with the motivation of it. I mean, I feel like it felt very much like how boxing and UFC and stuff kind of handles their business, especially with these personal endeavors, where they're kind of feuding back and forth, I don't know. It felt like a real world thing to me within the world of fighting sports. And even for me, if someone tells me I can't do something for weightlifting or whatever, it fires me up. You know, it's like, I want that pressure. Like if I'm having a tough session and I have to like hit these weights or something and I really don't want to, or like it's just heavy that day or whatever, like I try to go find someone in the gym and I'm like, hey, like, can you watch this lift? Like whether it's my coach or a training partner or someone else in the gym, you know, a friend, I'm like, hey, I need you to watch this lift just so there's like pressure on me, you know? And my coach at one point said like, I don't think you can hit this number by this time. And like, that just gives me fuel to be like, you want to bet? Like
you said,
like, yeah.
You said run it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, all right, I'm going to work on this movement extra now. Yeah. Outside of your programming, coach, just so I can get better at this movement to prove you wrong, which, you know, like I think that's a big driver in sports. And like you talked about, he's not doing the thing that he loves anymore.
Yeah.
And
thinking back on that kind of warmed me up to it a little bit, that they did include that heavily in the movie.
Yeah.
The idea of, and it's so cool, the dialogue in this movie is stellar, near perfect, I would say, yes. For the movie that it's being written in. And there's the way that Dame talks is very much like somebody who's desocialized, who's used to being in an institution. He's super direct, and he says right to Bianca, talking about, how do you feel about not doing what you love anymore, watching someone else sing your song? What do you think he feels about it? He's very direct. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think the strengths of the movie are in the dialogue, the music, and then Michael B. Jordan's directing.
Yeah.
But overall, great movie. Has my stamp of approval to tell anyone in the audience to go and watch it. Spend your money to go to the theaters. It's great.
Absolutely. I'm really excited that this movie was as good as I was hoping it to be. You know, because the trailers and just all the like pre-interviews and stuff that I was watching, like it was getting me hyped up. And the fact that you didn't really like the first two Creeds, you know, like this one had to be a home run, you know, or this podcast would be a lot different. I would have to, one, either be defending it because I still thought it was a decent movie, or like I'd be disappointed and be like, yeah, like these aren't that good, you know, like they're okay. But like this one knocked it out of the park. I think we praised this movie more than we've praised other movies, you know, like
most other movies.
We love this movie.
Well, there's just a really good feeling of coming from the theater of a movie that you enjoyed.
Yes.
And that carries on into this.
This feels a lot different than even watching Ant-Man. You know, we came right from the theater from that one too.
I like this more than Ant-Man for sure.
Absolutely.
Sorry, my box office picks.
Yeah, definitely. Watch this one make more money than Ant-Man. That would be wild.
So do you have any closing thoughts?
I think that kind of touched on everything that I had written down.
We've sung this movie's praises enough, I think.
Yeah, we went deep into this movie here and talked about a lot of things. We talked about a lot of the other Rocky stuff. We went outside and talked about Sylvester Stallone and why he's not in the movie. So I think that kind of covers everything else. Do you think they'll make a fourth one?
I honestly, at the end of this movie, I was thinking they're teeing up the daughter for fights.
I was thinking the same thing, I was like, please, no.
I would go watch that.
You think so?
I think it could be good if Michael B. Jordan's directing it again and leading, you know. I think that if he's coaching his daughter and maybe we go into the world of like teenage boxing, like maybe she's a boxer, kickboxer, and she's like 16. I think that's a whole new world and could be a fresh take, especially when you have a female fighter, so.
Yeah, if Michael B. Jordan's directing, I'll watch.
I'll give it a shot
for sure. I'm excited to see what else he decides to take on.
I'll be excited for his next project. I think he's learned a lot being so close to Ryan Coogler for Fruitvale Station, Black Panther, Creed 1. It's a great director. I think he's taken on a lot of knowledge from that, which is smart. So, definitely. But I do want to thank our audience for listening and watching the show. We appreciate you so much. We post new videos every Monday and Thursday. We're on all podcast platforms and YouTube as well.
Yes, thanks so much for listening, and that's
a wrap.